From the windows of my new home, the night view of San Francisco glittered and sparkled. Located in the heart of Silicon Valley, this 4-bedroom house was an extravagant purchase for a 26-year-old woman to make on her own. Initially, the real estate agent looked at me with skeptical eyes. However, once my financial statements and proof of income were reviewed, his attitude completely changed. My name is Isabella Wang. I am a female software engineer working in Silicon Valley. 4 years ago, I earned a degree in computer science from a prestigious university and joined a major tech company as a new graduate. In an industry dominated by men, it was not easy to stand out as an Asian woman. Nevertheless, with my innate talent and hard work, I led project after project to success, and at the young age of 26, I had already achieved the position of a senior engineer. Since joining the company, I have lived a life of strict frugality. While my peers rented luxury apartments and drove the latest Teslas, I lived modestly in shared housing and saved most of my salary. This was not merely a hobby of thrift. It was driven by a clear goal: to own my own home. For me, it symbolizes financial independence and would be the culmination of my efforts. Finally, I achieved that goal. On the day I finished the house purchase process, I indulged in a small sense of accomplishment. It has a spacious living room, large windows reaching up to the ceiling, and a kitchen equipped with the latest facilities. Everything was exactly as I had envisioned. What I particularly loved was the master bedroom on the second floor. It featured an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet, and the balcony offered a panoramic view of the bay. Just as I was imagining my new life in this house, a phone call from my parents changed everything. "Isabella, we need to talk." My mother's voice lacked its usual authority. Instead, it was mixed with a frailty and urgency. Both of my parents had worked for many years as public school teachers in a regional city. My father was a math teacher, and my mother taught English. Despite having stable careers, their financial situation had deteriorated year by year. The cause was my father's reckless investment decisions. He had incurred massive losses in stock investments, and in attempts to recoup these losses, he only deepened them further. Eventually, they even took on high-interest debt. The school district is cutting budgets, and they've suggested we take early retirement. My mother continued, choosing her words carefully. "The retirement pay. It's almost entirely gone to pay off the debts." I could feel through the phone that my mother was holding back tears. "We can't even afford the rent anymore. We've been asked to vacate in 2 months." Silence followed. Though my mother didn't state it explicitly, her intention was clear. She was asking for help. A warning bell started ringing in my mind. I had known since childhood about my parents' lack of financial sense. The fact that I had won a scholarship and gone to university was because I knew I couldn't rely on them. Yet, why did I have to end up helping them? But blood is thicker than water. In the end, the words, "You can come live with me," came out of my mouth. Their move happened swiftly. Their belongings were fewer than expected. Most of their furniture had been sold to repay debts. What was left were worn clothes, photographs of memories, and just enough daily necessities for 2 people. When they moved in, I set clear rules. I would take care of the mortgage, utility bills, and other fixed costs. In return, they would handle the groceries. I also made them promise to respect my workspace and privacy. The first few weeks were seemingly peaceful on the surface. My parents showed gratitude and seemed to respect my work. My mother prepared meals daily, and my father started gardening. It appeared as though an ideal living arrangement had begun. However, the peaceful days did not last long. Gradually, my parents' true nature began to emerge. My mother monopolized the kitchen time and ignored my dietary preferences. My father turned up the TV volume during the day, disrupting my online meetings. These minor changes steadily began to disrupt the rhythm of my life. And then, an event that would ultimately trigger a breakdown occurred. The presence of my sister, Brittany, began to cast a shadow over my life once again. It was a Saturday morning. A dense fog typical of San Francisco enveloped the outside of the windows, casting dim shadows inside the house. I was deeply engrossed in debugging crucial code in my home office on the second floor. Suddenly, I heard a knock. When my mother entered the room, I instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen. Her expression was mixed with complex emotions I had never seen before: guilt, anxiety, and a strange kind of resolve. "Isabella, there's something we need to talk about," my mother said, her voice deliberately softened. It was the tone one might use when discussing something difficult with a young child. I took my eyes off my laptop screen and looked towards my mother. "It's about your sister, Brittany." The moment I heard that name, my body tensed. Brittany, my 23-year-old sister. She had ruined her own life while basking in our parents' perpetual favoritism. Since dropping out of college, she had been drifting through life without a steady job, dating dubious men, and breaking up repeatedly. Brittany's in trouble. She's having problems with her boyfriend Jonathan. Whenever Brittany was in trouble, it followed the same pattern: reckless spending, debt accumulation, and eventually turning to our parents for a resolution. "She's looking for a place to live now." My mother's words trailed off. At that moment, I understood everything. "You're not planning to let her stay here, are you?" My mother's expression hardened. "We've allowed Brittany and Jonathan to stay here temporarily." A shock ran through me. They had made such a critical decision without my consent. "You must be joking? I bought this house. I'm paying the mortgage and all the expenses. How could you make such an important decision without consulting me?" "It was an emergency. Brittany is family. Isn't it natural to help family members?" That word, family. It was the magic word my parents always used. A convenient shield to justify their selfish actions. Family? I thought taking in our parents was fulfilling my duty as a family member. But now my sister too, and without even asking. "You wouldn't understand. Brittany really is in trouble. She and Jonathan are." "Who's Jonathan? Brittany's new boyfriend? Do you even know anything about him?" My mother averted her eyes. "Well, Brittany seems to trust him." My parents had always just accepted the men Brittany brought home without even verifying their backgrounds. That evening, Brittany and Jonathan arrived. My suspicions were confirmed. Brittany was dressed as flamboyantly as ever, her makeup far too heavy. And beside her was a man who could be immediately identified as a troublemaker. Jonathan looked to be in his mid-30s. He had an unkempt beard and sloppy attire, and there was a dangerous look in his eyes. When he entered the house, I instinctively tensed up. Their belongings were more than I expected. Large suitcases, boxes, and even a gaming console. Clearly, they weren't here for a temporary stay. About the rent each month. As I began to broach the subject, Brittany quickly hid behind my mother. "Mom promised it would be free." Her voice still carried the arrogance of the past. I looked at my mother. She hurried off into the kitchen. At that moment, I realized. This wasn't just a temporary stay. They intended to squat in my house. That night, I couldn't sleep. As I gazed out at the night view of San Francisco from my window, I pondered how to resolve this situation. But this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. Brittany and Jonathan gradually began to take over more space in the house. At first, it was minor things. Jonathan's gaming console appeared in the living room, and Brittany's makeup started to scatter across the kitchen counter. Noise deep into the night, unauthorized use of the refrigerator, and the common areas left in disarray. My parents acted as if there were no problems at all. In fact, they seemed pleased that Brittany had returned to the family circle. My protests were always dismissed with the same phrases. "She's family. It's just temporary. Try to be more understanding." However, their true intentions would become clear all too soon. 2 weeks had passed since Brittany and Jonathan had moved in. My house was no longer just my house. It was a gradual but certain erosion. Jonathan's presence was particularly intolerable. Jonathan occupied the living room day and night, deeply engrossed in his video games at high volume. Even during my online meetings, his curses and rough laughter were incessantly audible. When cautioned, his retort was simply, "It's a shared space, isn't it?" Brittany was eroding my life in even more troublesome ways. She used my expensive cosmetics without permission, and the bathroom overflowed with her array of makeup products. Furthermore, she wore my designer brand clothes under the guise of borrowing them and returned them stained. My parents acted as if they were oblivious to these actions. Rather, every time I complained, they admonished me with a tone that suggested I should not blame Brittany over such trivial matters. However, a decisive event occurred one Wednesday afternoon. After finishing a video conference with an important client, I left my office and heard an unusual noise coming from the direction of my room. My heart started pounding faster. As I rushed up the stairs, an unbelievable scene unfolded before my eyes. My personal belongings, clothes, books, computer accessories, were all piled up in the hallway. My expensive monitor was carelessly placed on the floor, and designer clothes were thrown about. When I opened the door to the master bedroom, I found Brittany and Jonathan in the midst of clearing out my remaining belongings. Brittany was dragging clothes out of my walk-in closet, complete with hangers, while Jonathan was emptying my bookshelf. "What are you doing?" My voice trembled. I felt frozen all over with anger and shock. Brittany responded as if what she was doing was perfectly normal. "We're going to use this room." "Who decided that?" "Mom said it was okay. We as a couple need more space." "You're single, right?" I immediately went in search of my mother. She was in the kitchen on the first floor, preparing dinner as if nothing was amiss. "What is the meaning of this?" My voice was as cold as ice. My mother set down her knife and slowly turned towards me. Her expression carried a sort of determination. "Isabella, I've thought about it. Brittany and Jonathan need more space. You're alone, and besides, you spend most of your time at the office, right? This house is mine. I bought it. I'm paying the mortgage and all the expenses. Yet you made a decision about my room without consulting me. We should share because we're family. You always think only of yourself. Have you ever considered Brittany's feelings?" At that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about a room. This was a calculated invasion. They had intended to drive me out from the start. My father was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa. Even when I sought an explanation, he just looked away in silence. As it had always been throughout my life, my father chose to remain a bystander. When I returned upstairs, Brittany and Jonathan had already started moving their belongings into my room. Jonathan's sloppy clothes were hanging in the closet, and Brittany's makeup had taken over my vanity. "Get out." I spoke in a low voice. "What did you say?" Brittany furrowed her brow. "Get out of this room, right now," Mom said. "It doesn't matter. This is my house, my room. Get out." Jonathan stepped towards me. He was larger than me, and his posture carried an obvious threat. "Calm down, you're being childish. We're family, right? Let's share." That word again. They continued to use it as a shield to justify their selfish actions. That night, I was forced to sleep in my office. Even taking a pillow and blanket became a major point of contention. Brittany insisted, "It's our room now," and my mother supported her. As I lay down, I stared at the ceiling. This was my house. The house I worked hard to buy. The house for which I paid all the expenses. Yet, I was being treated like an intruder, driven out of my own room. This situation had gone beyond all limits. The next morning, I made a decision. It was time to take legal action. Despite the physical pain from spending a night on the office chair, my mind was clearer than ever. I searched on my smartphone for "how to evict squatters" and "family eviction." Throughout the night, at 8 a.m., I was on the phone with the most reputable real estate law firm in the region. The secretary said this type of case isn't uncommon, and she set up an appointment with a lawyer for the first afternoon. I'm attorney Christina Johnson. The female attorney, in her mid-50s, listened intently to my story. Spread out on her desk were my house's deed, payment records, and detailed notes on recent events I had prepared. This is a clear case of residential infringement. You are the owner and have made all the payments. Even if they are family, they have no right to occupy a room without your consent. But they are my parents. Family relationships are separate from legal rights. You have legitimate ownership. What's needed now is a firm stance. That afternoon, I explained the situation to my boss and took 2 days of emergency leave. My boss showed understanding for the family emergency. They could never imagine the true nature of that emergency. Following Attorney Johnson's advice, I first prepared a formal eviction notice. I set a 24-hour deadline for Brittany and Jonathan and a 30-day deadline for my parents. This was the minimum period legally required. Why 30 days for my parents? Legally, they are considered established residents. On the other hand, Brittany and Jonathan are recent intruders. A more swift action is possible for them. The moment I printed the notice, my hands trembled slightly. I was about to legally evict my own family, but there was no turning back. They had trampled over my kindness and cornered me. This was a necessary measure for self-defense. When I returned home, Brittany and Jonathan were lounging in the living room, as usual. My parents were preparing dinner at the dining table. It was as if this were their home. Without saying a word, I took out the 4 eviction notices. I placed Brittany and Jonathan's in front of them first, then laid my parents on the dining table. What is this? Brittany picked up the letter with an annoyed look. It's an eviction notice. Brittany and Jonathan, you have 24 hours. Mom and Dad, you have 30 days to leave. After a moment of silence, the room erupted into chaos. You're joking, right? We're family. Yes, we are. But family members should respect each other. You've trampled on my rights and tried to drive me out. It ends now. Jonathan stood up threateningly. You're going to kick us out. That's right. If you don't comply, I'll call the police. Attorney Johnson is also on standby. My mother broke down crying. How can you do this? Are you really my daughter? Those words stung, but I could no longer be swayed by emotions. If you don't leave by tomorrow morning, I'll call the police. I issued my final ultimatum. And I'm changing the locks. My father spoke for the first time. Isabella, can't you reconsider? I've had plenty of time to think. You had plenty of time to consider my feelings. But no one listened to me. That night, the house was enveloped in an unusual tension. Brittany and Jonathan began packing their belongings violently. My parents silently retreated to their room. I locked myself in the office. Just in case, I kept the emergency number for the police and Attorney Johnson's contact information close at hand. All night long, noises came from downstairs. The next morning, as promised, I had called a locksmith. Brittany and Jonathan had left during the night, and my parents said they would temporarily stay with relatives and left as well. As the sound of the new locks being installed echoed, I surveyed my now empty house. This wasn't the end. Perhaps the real battle was just beginning. But at least I had stood up for my rights. After the locksmith left, I returned to my room for the first time. My belongings were scattered, furniture mishandled. Yet all of this could be repaired. What mattered most was that I had reclaimed my life. My smartphone rang. It was from Attorney Johnson. Let's move on to the next steps. They may retaliate with legal measures. Let's prepare. Yes, I'm ready. A week after evicting my family, the situation took a new turn. One Monday morning while I was at the office, a colleague came to me in a fluster. Isabella, your family is in the lobby. They're shouting loudly. As I stepped out of the elevator, the scene unfolding before me was exactly as I had anticipated. Brittany and Jonathan, along with my parents, were causing a commotion at the reception desk. My mother tearfully proclaimed my heartlessness, while my father raised his voice demanding, "Let me see my daughter." Brittany, while recording everything on her phone, shouted, "She's the cold-hearted woman who kicked out her own family." Security was attempting to control them, but there was no sign of the situation calming down. I immediately contacted Attorney Johnson. "Make sure to record this as evidence. This is clear harassment." Later that evening, another incident occurred. A flood of derogatory comments began appearing on my social media accounts. Brittany had spread my personal information online, crafting a narrative that labeled me as the cruel sister who left her own family homeless. Days later, the repercussions reached my workplace. Anonymous accusation emails were sent to the Human Resources Department, reporting my antisocial behavior. Fortunately, my boss understood the situation and supported taking legal action. "We will document everything," Attorney Johnson said with determination. "Their actions constitute clear defamation and harassment. Let's prepare for a countersuit." Following the lawyer's advice, we commenced a comprehensive legal response. Residential infringement, harassment, defamation, and business interference. All evidence was organized and submitted to the court. At the first hearing, the judge immediately acknowledged our claims. The defendants' actions are clearly illegal and malicious. The judgment stated, a restraining order was issued, and they were ordered to pay a substantial amount in damages. Brittany broke down crying in the courtroom. "But we are family." However, the judge responded calmly. "Family relations do not justify illegal actions." Following the verdict, the lives of my parents and Brittany quickly deteriorated. The damages payments depleted my parents' remaining savings, and even their pensions were seized. I heard rumors that my father had started working as a security guard in another town. The image of a former high school teacher working as a night security guard must have completely shattered his dignity. My mother began working part-time as a cashier at a local supermarket. I remembered how she once scorned such jobs as work for the uneducated. Now, she herself was in that position. Brittany's downfall was even more severe. As soon as the payment of the damages was settled, Jonathan disappeared. With accumulated debts, Brittany's credit cards were stopped, and she could no longer pay her rent. The last I heard, she was denied an application for public housing and was hopping from one friend's house to another. One day, I received an email from my mother. "Isabella, we are reflecting on our actions. Please, exempt us from the payments. We cannot sustain our lives going forward. You are still young and successful. Consider your aging parents a little. Please." From Mom. My reply was succinct. "No exemptions. You tried to take my home. You attempted to destroy my life. This is a legal matter. The time for emotional resolutions has long passed. Isabella." Attempts at reconciliation came several times through relatives afterward. But my resolve was firm. This was not merely a family dispute. They had systematically infringed on my rights and threatened my life. Months later, I saw Brittany at a supermarket in town. Her flashy attire was gone, and she looked exhausted as she scanned job advertisements. I heard my parents were considering applying for welfare. They who once declared, "People who rely on welfare are lazy," were now forced into that very situation. One might call it poetic justice. When I returned home, tranquility enveloped me. The chaos and noise of the past were gone, and peace had returned. The fact that this house was now entirely mine was fully realized. On my desk, there were still a few legal documents: court orders, records of damages payments, applications for the renewal of restraining orders. These documents also served as proof of my break with my family. A year had passed since the legal victory. This year brought significant changes to my life. I was promoted, and my salary increased further. My new position as team lead brought greater responsibilities and more fulfillment. Without familial interference, I could focus on my work, accelerating my career. There were also significant changes at home. The master bedroom was completely renovated and furnished anew. The negative memories left by my family were physically erased. I installed a state-of-the-art security system in the living room, enabling 24-hour surveillance with security cameras. My parents and Brittany had been captured several times lurking around the house. Brittany, who was clearly intoxicated, continuously rang the doorbell late at night. Her downfall was evident. I had grown accustomed to living alone at home. I could have quiet breakfasts, a work environment free from interruptions, and undisturbed nights. Above all, I felt reassured that my decisions were completely respected. This was indeed the life I had sought. The phone rang. It was from Attorney Johnson. "The wage garnishment process has been completed," she reported. "This fully protects your rights." Looking out the window, the sunset was beautifully sinking. I felt that a new chapter was truly beginning.